Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and of course, by now you know I am here with Mike Simmons and Mike Connor. Mike and Mike, we got so much good feedback from the one time we had a guest on the show. We had Lee Cockrell as a special guest. So much good feedback, we thought we should do it again. So we've got a guest this time, Dan Peter. Dan is a Salesforce MVP, and Dan is a lead application engineer at Canandy. Welcome to Catalyst Sale Podcast, Dan.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for the nice introduction.
We were really happy to get you on the schedule because you've been so busy. We know you just returned from 2 conferences, one in Utah, one in Uruguay. So what were you up to?
Yeah. When it rains, it pours. These 2 conferences both accepted me to speak there, and they were back to back. Luckily, I was able to give the same presentation at both. So, by the second time around, I was pretty well versed in it. But, Utah was snow and Uruguay was summertime on the beach. So I had to pack my snow jacket and my flip-flops. So it's kind of an interesting schedule, interesting travel. But Salesforce has this kind of Ohana community spirit going on, and these community conferences are popping up everywhere now. Folks that love Salesforce they're building these conferences on their own. They're finding their own sponsors for them. They're doing it on their own time, and it's pretty amazing to see. Not a lot of other software communities are doing this sort of thing. Most people are more about getting their job done, and it seems like there's some actual legitimate relationships, some friendships that are coming out of these community conferences. There's also ROI attached with them. It's a great place to meet future customers, future partners, things like that. But it's also a ton of fun. So, I went to Utah, Snowforce. It's a great conference. It's been going for, I think, about 8 years. And I gave a presentation there on Hyperbatch, which is an open source project that I'm working on to let you run Salesforce jobs, maybe 100 or 1,000 times faster on the platform. So that's pretty cool. I got some good interest on that one. I met some great folks. Our company actually sponsored that conference, so I think they got some leads out of it. So great all-around conference. Utah was beautiful. Even though there was snow there, it was still pretty warm. I think Uruguay was a bit, there was the community spirit for sure, but it was kind of a bit of an opposite conference in a lot of ways. So this one was actually the first year. It was the inaugural year. The Uruguay Salesforce Developer Group down there has put this on. And really, Uruguay has a ton of great Salesforce developers. People don't really hear much about them. They don't know about them. So they've built stuff for many U.S. companies. Lots of people that hire offshore development do it from Uruguay, but there's just not much awareness about it. So they took it upon themselves to get us to come down there, bring some thought leadership, some innovative ideas, but then also take the awareness of Uruguay back to, mostly to the U.S., but there were some people from other countries as well. So that conference wasn't so much about generating leads. It was more about giving back to the Uruguayan developer community and helping them kind of reach the level of awareness that kind of they deserve in the world of Salesforce developers.
Dan, you talked about these community conferences. What's different about a community conference versus the traditional trade show? Is there something unique about the format? Can you talk a little bit about format used at either of them if they were a little bit different?
Yeah, they're actually kind of modeled after, say, a Dreamforce. So I would say there's more similarities than there are differences. I think some of the differences are they tend to be more regional. So maybe if you're having it in Utah, maybe the bulk of your attendees will be from Utah. If you're having it in Uruguay, the bulk will be in Uruguay. But you do get people that travel in from all over the world as well. They kind of give you a little more of that regional flair or whatever that industry is in that region. You get to learn more about that. And they also tend to have more of a fun element. So a lot of these will have there'll be like a 2-day conference. Maybe the first day will be sort of strictly business, technical sessions, things like that. But then the second day will be some unique regional networking opportunity, such as skiing or hiking. They kind of build these things around whatever the cool activities are to do in the area. And that's a dimension you may or may not get out of something like Dreamforce. So you can come away from these conferences having gone through somewhat of maybe a challenging experience with a bunch of folks, which kind of will give you a deeper relationship, having that shared thing you did together. So maybe if you need to, call them later on and ask for their advice on something, that interaction will be a little more genuine than, say, if you just met each other and exchanged business cards.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm kind of hearing in the theme of that is when I think about the amount of networking opportunities that we all have going to networking events, when I think about user group meetings that I used to go to, and a lot of times those are formed and created by the company that wants to, create a following and really support that community. But it's always interesting to me when you find some of these groups, and I know we've just participated in launching a group called the Sales Enablement Society, and we started the Scottsdale, Arizona, or the Arizona chapter, if you will, with an organization that didn't even exist a year ago, and it's already up to 1,400 members. I think there's 8 or 10 chapters. But kind of what you were saying, Dan, in that it's not being artificially created or anything like that. It's coming together with people with a common interest, with a passion for what they do. And it's amazing to see how quickly things can come together when you have people that just have that hard-coded common interest and vision. So I guess a question I have for you is, it sounds to me, and I got a flavor of this at Dreamforce, but how would you say that sort of the community, the informal community, is evolving with Salesforce, people that affiliate with Salesforce, that are Salesforce customers? And then also, how's the company sort of responding to that or leveraging that just in a natural, organic way?
Yeah, so Salesforce has always had a bit of a community. I remember the first time I went to solve some Salesforce problem and I Googled it, 2009. The results I started getting were from the Salesforce community and other Salesforce developers answering these questions. So it's always had that community aspect. But, since I've been in this almost, not quite, but almost 10 years, I've noticed this community has grown and changed quite a bit. So I think the biggest things that I've seen are coming from the top of the company. CEO Benioff has done some pretty unique and amazing things. He hired a chief equality officer there at Salesforce, and they've kind of coined this phrase Ohana. So they're really working on diversity, inclusion, like, a family type culture that they're cultivating. And they've got, things like Trailhead modules on the business value of having a diverse company. And they do things like they give awards to women in tech and this stuff. Benioff's a pretty influential guy in the Salesforce community. So when he starts doing this stuff, you see it filter through. And, I think the community was already there, but it's grown and it's become more socially conscious, doing more good for each other and for the community. So all those things, I think also the communities have gotten a lot more empowered to be more autonomous. So when you start seeing 500 people, maybe even as many as 2,500 people assembling themselves, reaching out to sponsors, pulling in it takes a good chunk of cash to rent a venue and pay all the event staff. When you see that kind of stuff, I think it inspires, kind of grows and inspires bigger and more of those types of things to happen. Everybody realizes, oh, well, that was possible. Now let's try this. So the point we're at now, sometimes in a given month, there might be 3 or 4 of these conferences going on in different parts of the world, and people are spending their own money to go to them, to see people, to learn some new things. It's a trend that's going on right now. It's almost like I hate to use the word fad because it's got a negative connotation, but it's definitely getting really popular.
So, Dan, you talked about one of the major themes or topics of diversity. Why diversity? Why is that important?
Well, I guess the easy answer would be just something like it's the right thing to do. But I think there's actually business value there. So it is possible to do good for society. And a lot of people say it's, I think Benioff phrases it something like the business of business is to improve the world. So there's that aspect of it. But I think if you're building something and you want to sell it to the whole world, you're probably going to want to have a cross section of the whole world that goes into creating it, or, you're going to limit the quality of your product. I think it's very easy to have a culture that kind of perpetuates itself of people with similar mindsets. But the problem with that is at the end of the day, you're going to end up with something that really doesn't solve a problem, and somebody else is going to figure it out and probably take your lunch with a much better product. So it's the right thing to do, but it also, I think it's a good business plan. It's more profitable.
And I mean, the takeaway I have from that is that with a greater amount of diversity, you create an opportunity for more innovation because of the various perspectives that you can bring to the table, rather than being surrounded by a bunch of people who are like you or have similar experiences. By diversifying that experience, it could actually foster innovation. Is that something that you're seeing?
Yeah, I see it for sure. We're pretty fortunate here at Canandy. We have a very diverse team, and so I get to see that play out every day. I oftentimes go into meetings with one idea in my head and leaving with a different idea that's much better. And I just think what the alternative would be to walk out with the same idea and to never converged on that better idea. So, I'm very fortunate. I get to see this play out.
Maybe that's one of the problems we have at Catalyst. We have too many mics.
I would definitely say we're diverse in our own special ways, because there's plenty of meetings we go into with one idea or two ideas, and then we come out with no idea at all. So, I mean, it can cut both ways, but we try and harness it. We call it creative conflict or creative tension that leads to our best decisions, because I'm not even going to give you the microphone back, because now you're going to get the last word on this. So,
Dan, this actually leads me, this creative tension Mike and Mike are talking about leads me to wonder, how did you get mixed up with Mike and Mike?
Yeah, we were former colleagues. I actually worked at a company, Safari Books Online. It's been, what has it been? I think about 4 years ago. It's probably about the last time we worked together.
It's been probably 4 or 5 years. Yeah, I think we first met during, well, actually what had happened, we were doing a Salesforce implementation. And I'll tell you, I've probably never told you this before, Dan, but the first time that I really heard about who you were was we were releasing a new version of the platform, and it had a couple of bugs. And our team, we went live, we pushed it to our entire company, to our entire subscriber base. And the people that worked on the product were really scrambling, putting out fires and trying to make things work. And I just remember hearing in emails and things like that, they're like, wow, this new guy, Dan, is figuring stuff out faster than anybody else on the team. And he had just started with the company. So he kind of made a name for himself from that sort of adventure. And then we really had a Salesforce implementation where we were relying on an outside consultant or consultants to implement for us. And a year into the project, we weren't making any progress. And that's when we brought Dan in, and Dan actually got the job done for us. So that's kind of where we started, us being in sales, being sort of the functional experts or at least we thought we were, and trying to, do the implementation. And Dan was the guy that actually made it happen. So that's really where we crossed paths, and he still talks to us. So that's a great thing.
Yeah, it's very cool that we still can cross paths. We're still in a space with some overlap. Salesforce is number one CRM, and you guys are interested in sales, and I'm interested in Salesforce. So it's interesting to see where things take us in the future.
It's like we're a giant Venn diagram.
Yeah.
You love a good Venn diagram.
Anytime I can say Venn diagram, I have to put it out there. Got to throw it in.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, the experience at Safari was I actually first started Salesforce developing there, and that's where I fell in love with the platform. Before that, I was working on other platforms, much more tedious, much more slow to build things. So, we were able to run a huge company with a huge sales team, customer service team, off of Salesforce very successfully. So it was a great experience.
So Dan, one of the other topics that came up when we were talking earlier is women in technology. Can you talk a little bit about how that how that topic's being addressed, or what's happening in the space around women in technology and why that's important? I know we hit on diversity a bit, but How about women in technology? What do you think of there?
Yeah, it's a timely topic. There's a lot going on in that field right now. I hear about it pretty much every day. I'm actually our developer group is doing a meetup next month on women in tech. I work here at Canandy, which was founded by a pretty amazing woman, Sandy Kurtzig. She's nicknamed the mother of Silicon Valley, if you want to look her up. She's got some amazing credits to her name. But, the deal is across the board, most companies we're seeing, there just isn't a representative number of women. When you look at the population of women versus what's in the company, there's a big discrepancy, especially as you get to higher levels of the company and especially as you start looking at pay. Salesforce led an internal effort where they mapped all this out and they made all the adjustments they needed to close the gap. So I think it's probably an optimistic view. I think it's an ongoing thing. I think they're probably continually trying to keep that gap closed. If you go to the About Us page, then look at the board members and the C-suite on most companies these days, you won't see a ton of women in there. So I think women are excellent in the field of technology, and we need to encourage more of them. It's a great career to be in right now. There's no reason why there shouldn't be sort of something closer to an equal mix in the field. Here at Canandy, we've got many women. I think maybe the founder kind of maybe has attracted a lot of women. I don't know why it is, but we've got a lot of women here, and it's great to be able to work with them. We really are building a super complex product, and we have a high-performing team. I think one of the reasons we're able to execute on this complex product is the diversity and the nice representative amount of women on our teams.
Yeah, it's certainly something we all hear about. And I can tell you from having daughters, it's the kind of thing that's not going to change overnight. I think everybody has the aspirations and the desire to have more women in these senior positions and things like that. But at the same time, a lot of, and I'm just speaking from my experience as a dad of 3 girls, that maybe a generation ago, the expectations or the aspirations that a 10 or 12 or 14-year-old girl would have about a career choice, I see that changing so much now that it will, I think, over time, start to really add to, the ability to hire more women in these roles and give them more opportunities to be in these roles. And I just base that on just the interests that I see, that instead of being interested in doing what would have been stereotypical boy or girl activities or things like that, you see things like young girls in engineering or make events, things like that, that it's really just about inspiring curiosity and creativity with kids, regardless of their gender. And I don't think that, at least when I talk to my girls, and they're not that young anymore, they're like late teens and mid 20s, but the idea that they really don't see those as barriers anymore. If that's something they're really interested in, that's what they would pursue. So I would hope that by the time we're all retired and cashing fat checks, retirement checks, that this would be a topic that they'll reflect back on and say, wow, can you believe there was a time when only boys went into engineering or only boys went into whatever? I think we'll see that shift, but it's just going to take some time, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It will take time, and it's kind of a pipeline, and obviously kids start at a certain age. It takes them years to go through the whole high school, college, and all that and figure out the career. So it's kind of got at least like a 10-year pipeline there to change it from the beginning. So
Dan, I've noticed recently you've been tweeting and retweeting a lot of stuff related to Einstein and AI and Salesforce initiatives related to AI. Do you have anything that you can share with our audience around that and what you're excited about and anything that we as a group should be aware of as being out there?
Yeah, it's exciting for sure. I don't know if you remember at Safari, we built something to this effect, but it was very hard to build. But the outcome of it was we got basically free money. We got, by applying this magical algorithm, now 3 times more people click on your link and potentially renew with your product or engage with your product and purchase your product. So what Einstein's going to do is allow you to get that same kind of magic without all that tedious work. It's going to be a few clicks, hopefully, to get the same effect. So all these companies that can't afford to do all this crazy data science programming, you're not going to be able to get the benefits. Just whatever nominal fee they tack on to your Salesforce bill, You now get the ability to sort of turn people into a superhuman, make sure that you're working maybe at that 2 or 3x or 10x level because you're focusing on the right things and you know what your customers want to hear without actually having to do the work to figure it out yourself.
So with Einstein, Connor will be able to operate at 30x.
10 times 3.
Actually, the thing that I was chuckling in the back of my head was the nominal tack on from Salesforce, because they're really good at that. I mean, as far as the tack on goes.
Oh, yeah.
But somebody's got to pay for all this stuff. So I get that. But yeah, from any of the bigger players, usually that nominal tack on is, well, we're a startup, right? We're a bootstrap startup and we're not flush with investor cash. So those little tack ons add up. But
your definition of nominal.
But yeah, but one thing that is true is that we could never afford to hire a guy like Dan or anybody else full time to be able to build those tools for us. And I think that's one thing for us as an early stage company that has to be really careful about things. When I think about my first startup 13 or 14 years ago, the amount of money we had to invest in software and telecom and just the things that I think today people take for granted, the cost involved in that and the time it took to get that infrastructure in place. And then today, to get up and running, you're subscribing to 10 or 12 key, very affordable products that have far more functionality than what we were paying thousands of dollars for 10 years ago. It really has opened up a lot of opportunity to be able to focus on the problem you're trying to solve instead of focusing on how do we build the infrastructure to let us run our company. So I think that'll be an exciting part of certainly that Einstein's one example of how Salesforce is evolving and incorporating AI, but there's all kinds of platforms. And that's one of the things I really like about what we do as well, is that we work with a lot of different companies that support different technologies, have a lot of great ideas. And I think that's what's made this journey a lot of fun, is that we get to see things that we probably would have never had the opportunity to get involved with in that early stage. So it's pretty exciting to see how quickly you can move now.
Yeah, and Salesforce has done this pattern over and over again. They take these difficult things like creating a custom application, creating custom reports, and they make it sort of point and click. So that's been kind of their model, and now they're just taking it to the next level. The next exciting technology, they're bringing it in and making it accessible and easy to build with. So I think it's kind of there'll be something after that, blockchain or something like that, and they'll make it easy to use. But I think the key with the artificial intelligence is in the context. I think you guys have talked about this in previous podcasts, but the context we're in right now is like information overload, where it's pretty much getting impossible for people to sift through this stuff. So you kind of need something like this to do that heavy lifting for you, to really have either a chance of just maintaining or trying to be more successful than your competition. Without that, you're just going to fall behind because everybody else is going to start figuring it out, and you're just going to get bogged down in minutia.
Dan, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I want to take this all the way back to something you said in the beginning, going to your 2 conferences and how you had to pack. I know there's been trips where Mike Simmons has packed a fluffy winter coat and flip-flops for the same trip, so not even different locations. But it's been so great to have you here on the show. Is there anything else you'd like to add as we wrap up?
I just want to thank you for having me. It's really cool to reconnect with former colleagues in new context. So it's been a great opportunity. I love to see what you guys are up to. So the whole Catalyst Sale thing has been a lot of fun to watch.
Well, thank you so much. Where can people connect with you?
Twitter's my preferred channel. There's so many channels now. I tend to focus on maybe just one. So I'm Daniel J. Peter on Twitter. You can probably Google Daniel Peter Salesforce and find me there some roundabout way. And then also, if you happen to be in the Bay Area, we do a developer group, Salesforce Developer Group meetup. It's usually the last Wednesday of every month, so stop on by.
All right. Thank you so much, Dan. This has been a great episode. And thank you, Mike and Mike, for bringing Dan in and having such a lively conversation. If you're enjoying this show and you want to find out more, just visit catalystsale.com. There you can find out more information about Catalyst Sale, as well as all the past episodes of this show. So thank you so much for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast.